I've learned some important detail of the forensic test results, and they rather explain perhaps why the Portuguese police are so confident in their theory that Madeleine's parents, one or other of them, played a part in their daughter's death.
The smell hit them first. Workers at the local dump outside Praia da Luz were accustomed to foul odours, but this was different, distinctive, sickening. When they traced it to an abandoned refrigerator partially concealed behind construction debris, what they discovered would shake Portugal to its core. A refrigerator that, according to multiple witnesses, had disappeared from apartment 5A at the Ocean Club Resort exactly 24 days earlier. The same apartment where a young girl had vanished without a trace. What happened in those critical 24 days? Why did authorities ignore the refrigerator's disappearance? And most disturbing of all, why did cadaver dogs alert to the scent of death in the exact spot where that appliance once stood? Welcome back to Criminal Instinct, where we dive deep into the cases that authorities don't want you to know about. If this is your first time here, hit that subscribe button and notification bell right now. Our community is growing because we ask the questions others won't, and today's case might be the most shocking example yet. The story I'm about to tell you has been systematically suppressed, with journalists threatened, evidence mysteriously disappearing, and an entire investigation derailed through political pressure. What began as a missing person case quickly spiraled into something far more sinister, a potential cover-up reaching the highest levels of multiple governments. For over a decade, the official narrative has dominated headlines, but beneath the carefully crafted story lies a web of contradictions, deleted evidence, and one detective's relentless pursuit of truth. Gonçalo Amaral, the original lead investigator, risked everything to expose what he believed really happened during those 24 days of horror. At the center of it all, a refrigerator that vanished, forensic evidence that was never fully explained, and DNA findings that were suppressed from public view. Tonight, we're piecing together the timeline that no one wants you to see, from the first contradictory statements to the cadaver dog alerts, from the mysterious rental car to the digital evidence that someone tried desperately to erase. This isn't just another true crime story. This is about how wealth, connections, and media manipulation can potentially rewrite history and bury the truth. The evidence we'll examine tonight challenges everything you thought you knew about this infamous case. Some of what I'm about to share may disturb you. It should. Because when justice is compromised, when powerful forces intervene to control a narrative, we all become less safe. The implications of this case reach far beyond one family's tragedy. They strike at the heart of our trust in the systems designed to protect us. Before we dive deeper, I'm curious. Where are you watching from tonight? Drop your location in the comments below. This case has captivated people worldwide, and I'm always amazed at how far our Criminal Instinct family reaches. Now let's go back to Portugal, to the moment when a vacation paradise became the setting for one of the most controversial investigations in criminal history. Praia da Luz, Portugal, May 2007. A small, picturesque resort town on the Algarve coast, where whitewashed villas cascade down to golden beaches. The Ocean Club Resort sits just a few hundred yards from the shoreline, its apartments arranged around swimming pools and manicured gardens. It's the low season, but still warm enough to attract British families seeking affordable spring getaways. Among them, a group of 9 adults, 4 couples and 1 single woman, all medical professionals from the UK. They've arranged their apartments to be close together, with the central family taking apartment 5A, a ground-floor unit with a patio door facing away from the resort's tapas restaurant where the adults dined each evening. Their routine had been established over several days: dinner at 8:30 p.m. while their children slept in the apartments, with members of the group allegedly checking on the children periodically. On the evening of May 3rd, this routine would become the foundation of one of the most scrutinized timelines in criminal history. According to official statements, at approximately 10 p.m., one of the mothers returned to apartment 5A for a routine check and discovered her daughter missing from her bed. The 2 younger siblings remained asleep in their cribs. What followed was a night of escalating panic, with resort staff and eventually local police joining the search for the missing child. But even in these earliest hours, contradictions began to emerge. Contradictions that would multiply as the investigation progressed. The first responding officers noted several peculiarities. Despite claims of an abduction through a window, the apartment showed no signs of forced entry. The window in question, according to crime scene photographs, had fingerprints only from the mother. More puzzling still, the shutters that were claimed to have been forced open were later confirmed by maintenance staff to be functioning normally, with no damage consistent with a break-in. The timeline itself began to fracture under scrutiny. Initial statements from the dinner companions contained discrepancies about who checked on the children, when, and what exactly they observed. One dinner guest reported seeing a man carrying a child away from the resort around 9:15 p.m., a sighting that would become central to the abduction narrative, yet waited until after the alarm was raised to mention this critical detail. Perhaps most troubling were the inconsistencies in the parents' own accounts. In initial statements to police, they described the apartment's doors as being locked, then later changed this to say the patio door had been left unlocked. The positioning of furniture, particularly the children's beds in relation to walls and windows, also varied between statements. Within 24 hours, the case had exploded into an international media sensation. British news crews arrived before specialized Portuguese investigators could reach the scene. The apartment itself, rather than being immediately sealed as a potential crime scene, had been contaminated by dozens of people searching for the missing child. Resort staff, volunteers, and family friends moved freely through the space, compromising potential evidence. Portuguese police, accustomed to methodical investigations away from media scrutiny, found themselves overwhelmed by the international attention and pressure for immediate results. This pressure would only intensify in the coming days. As forensic teams finally began their work, another disturbing element emerged, one that would later become crucial to Amaral's investigation. The apartment's refrigerator, a standard white unit typical of vacation rentals, appeared in initial police photographs. Yet in subsequent documentation of the apartment, it was conspicuously absent. No official record documented its removal, and when questioned later, property managers could not explain its disappearance. By the end of the first 24 hours, two parallel narratives were forming. The official version, amplified by a hastily assembled publicity team and sympathetic British media, centered on a stranger abduction through a bedroom window. The second, developing quietly among Portuguese investigators, focused on the timeline inconsistencies, lack of evidence supporting a break-in, and the strange behavior of those closest to the case. What few realized then was how these initial contradictions would multiply over the coming days and weeks. The investigation was already compromised by media contamination, political pressure, and a crime scene that had been irreparably disturbed. But as Portuguese authorities would soon discover, the most troubling evidence was yet to emerge. As dawn broke on May 4th, no one could have predicted the international firestorm that was about to engulf this small coastal town, or the shocking discoveries that would lead investigators to a local dump and a refrigerator with a horrifying secret. The first 48 hours after the disappearance set a pattern that would define the entire case: confusion, contradictions, and an investigation fighting against unprecedented media interference. By May 5th, just 2 days after the child vanished, Portuguese police had already interviewed all 9 dinner companions twice, noting troubling inconsistencies in their accounts of the evening's timeline. On May 6th, the investigation took its first major turn. Forensic teams discovered microscopic blood traces on the wall of apartment 5A, invisible to the naked eye, but revealed through luminol testing. These traces were located behind the sofa that had allegedly been pushed against the wall, the same sofa that appeared mysteriously moved in different police photographs. This discovery prompted investigators to question why someone might have cleaned the apartment so thoroughly before reporting the disappearance. May 7th brought another critical development when Portuguese authorities requested specialized search dogs from the UK. This wasn't a standard request. These weren't typical tracking dogs, but highly trained forensic animals. Eddie, a cadaver dog trained to alert only to human remains, and Keela, a blood detection dog with a perfect testing record. Their handler, Martin Grime, had worked hundreds of cases worldwide with these animals, whose reliability had been established in numerous criminal investigations and controlled tests. While waiting for the dogs to arrive, investigators continued examining witness statements. By May 8th, they had identified at least 17 significant contradictions between the statements of the 9 dinner companions, contradictions that couldn't be explained by simple memory lapses. Most concerning were the discrepancies around the 8:30–10 p.m. window on May 3rd, with conflicting accounts of who checked on which children and when. But what happened on May 10th changed everything. The property management company for the Ocean Club contacted police with disturbing information. The refrigerator from apartment 5A had disappeared. Maintenance records showed no scheduled replacement, and no staff member had authorized its removal. When investigators questioned resort employees, they learned something even more alarming. A cleaning staff member reported seeing the refrigerator being loaded into a vehicle late at night, approximately 1 week after the disappearance. No one had thought to report this until specifically questioned. By the time the cadaver dogs arrived on July 31st, the case had grown cold in the public's perception. But what these dogs discovered would reignite the investigation in the most shocking way possible. Eddie, the cadaver dog, alerted strongly in apartment 5A, specifically in the living room behind where the sofa had been positioned, in the parents' bedroom closet, and most significantly, in the exact kitchen corner where the refrigerator had once stood. The alerts were unmistakable and recorded on police video, the dog's behavior changing dramatically in these specific locations and nowhere else in the apartment complex. Even more damning was what happened when the dogs were brought to the vehicle rental agency. Out of dozens of cars in the parking lot, Eddie alerted to just one, a Renault Scenic rented by the family 24 days after the disappearance. Inside the car, forensic teams found traces that would later be sent for DNA analysis. The timeline now took on a disturbing new dimension. Why rent a car more than 3 weeks after your child vanishes, when the Portuguese police had already provided transportation? And why, according to rental records, did this vehicle travel over 1,700 kilometers in the following days, with no explanation provided for these journeys? When questioned about the excessive mileage, the family claimed they had used the car for searching. Yet police surveillance and witness statements confirmed they had conducted no searches during this period. The vehicle's GPS data, later recovered by investigators, showed multiple trips to remote areas outside Praia da Luz, areas that had never been mentioned in any search efforts. Most disturbing of all, the Renault Scenic's trunk contained microscopic traces that preliminary testing indicated were biological in nature. When Eddie the cadaver dog was brought to examine the vehicle, he alerted immediately to the trunk area and to the vehicle's key fob, behavior his handler described as indicating the presence of human cadaver scent. I need to pause here because this information still shocks me every time I review it. The implications of these findings, a cadaver dog alerting to the exact spot where a missing refrigerator once stood, then alerting to a car rented 24 days later, point to a timeline far different from the one presented to the public. What time is it where you're watching? This case keeps me up at night, and I'm curious if you're also losing sleep connecting these dots. Drop the time and your location in the comments below. As the investigation continued into August 2007, Portuguese authorities were building a case based on forensic evidence, canine alerts, and a timeline that increasingly pointed away from stranger abduction. But they couldn't have anticipated the extraordinary measures that were about to be deployed to derail their investigation, or the role that the missing refrigerator would play in the case's most controversial theory. The refrigerator theory wasn't born in a press conference or official police statement. Instead, it emerged gradually among Portuguese investigators as they pieced together the forensic evidence, witness statements, and the increasingly suspicious timeline surrounding the missing appliance. Gonçalo Amaral, the lead investigator until his controversial removal from the case, first documented the theory in his book, The Truth of the Lie, a publication that would later be temporarily banned through legal action. At its core, the theory proposes a shocking alternative to the abduction narrative, that the child died accidentally in apartment 5A, possibly on May 3rd or even earlier, and that the refrigerator was used to conceal remains until a more permanent solution could be arranged. This would explain both the cadaver dog alerts and the 24-day gap before the rental of the Renault Scenic. The theory wasn't speculative fantasy. It was built on specific evidence that had been documented by Portuguese authorities, but largely ignored by British media. First was the cadaver dog evidence. Eddie, with his training to alert only to human cadaver scent, gave his strongest alert precisely where the refrigerator had stood in apartment 5A. Martin Grime, the dog handler, noted in his official report that the alert was immediate and sustained, indicating significant contact with human remains. Importantly, Eddie alerted nowhere else in the apartment complex except the specific locations in 5A and later in the rental car. Second was the timeline of the refrigerator's disappearance. Maintenance records from the Ocean Club showed no work order for its removal. 3 separate resort employees provided statements confirming the appliance was present during initial searches on May 3rd and 4th, visible in early crime scene photographs. Yet by May 10th, when forensic teams returned for more detailed examination, it had vanished. A night security guard provided perhaps the most damning testimony. He reported seeing 2 men loading what appeared to be the apartment's refrigerator into a vehicle around 4 a.m. approximately 1 week after the disappearance. He didn't report this initially because, as he stated, I assumed it was authorized maintenance. When shown photographs of the 9 dinner companions, he identified one of them as resembling one of the men he had seen that night. If you're finding this information valuable and want to support our work uncovering the stories that others won't tell, please take a moment right now to hit the subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up. Your engagement helps us continue bringing these hidden truths to light, despite the powerful interests that would prefer these stories remain buried. The refrigerator theory gained further credibility when investigators discovered that the apartment had been thoroughly cleaned before police arrived. Luminol testing revealed evidence of extensive cleaning throughout the living room and kitchen area. More telling was the family's unusual request to wash certain items, including cuddle toys belonging to the missing child, immediately after reporting the disappearance. Hotel staff found this request bizarre given the circumstances, but complied before police could intervene. Cell phone records provided another piece of the puzzle. During the critical hours of May 3rd, there was an unusual pattern of communications between the 9 dinner companions, with a flurry of calls and text messages exchanged between 9 p.m. and midnight. When asked about these communications, several members of the group claimed they couldn't recall the content of these messages, and others stated their phones had been accidentally reset in the days following, erasing their message history. Perhaps most damning was what happened at the local dump site approximately 24 days after the disappearance, the same time frame as the rental car. A municipal worker reported finding an abandoned refrigerator that matched the description of the one from apartment 5A. According to his statement, he noticed it because of the unusual smell and its placement, partially concealed behind construction debris rather than in the designated appliance disposal area. By the time police investigated this report, the refrigerator had been processed through the facility's compactor. However, the worker had noted something unusual. The refrigerator's serial number plate had been removed, something he noticed because he supplemented his income by salvaging and reselling appliance parts. The theory gained further support when forensic analysis of the Renault Scenic revealed traces in the trunk area. Initial testing indicated these were biological in nature, and preliminary results suggested a potential match to the missing child. However, and this becomes crucial to understanding the case's controversial handling, these samples were sent to a British laboratory for final analysis rather than being processed in Portugal. When the results came back, they were accompanied by an unusual disclaimer stating that the samples were too degraded for conclusive identification. This contradicted the preliminary findings and raised questions about the chain of custody and testing protocols. Portuguese authorities requested the raw data from these tests, but were denied access. Adding to the suspicions surrounding the refrigerator theory were witness statements from neighbors near apartment 5A. 2 separate witnesses reported hearing the sound of a refrigerator being moved late at night in the week following the disappearance, a distinctive scraping noise across tile floors. Another witness, a taxi driver, reported picking up passengers matching the description of two of the dinner companions carrying what he described as a large cooler or small refrigerator to the marina area around 3 a.m. approximately 1 week after the disappearance. When confronted with these witness statements, the individuals in question denied any such activities and suggested the witnesses were either mistaken or fabricating stories for media attention. However, police noted that these witness statements were provided before any public mention of a missing refrigerator, making fabrication less likely. The refrigerator theory explains several otherwise puzzling elements of the case: the cadaver dog alerts, the 24-day gap before the car rental, the excessive mileage on that vehicle, and the multiple witness sightings of unusual activity involving an appliance. Yet this theory, despite its evidentiary support, would soon be aggressively suppressed through one of the most extraordinary media campaigns in criminal history. Within 72 hours of the disappearance, a sophisticated media operation had already taken shape, one that would ultimately control the public narrative with unprecedented effectiveness. The family had somehow secured the services of Clarence Mitchell, a former BBC journalist who had previously headed the UK government's media monitoring unit, a department responsible for shaping news coverage of sensitive issues. Mitchell left his government position to become the family's full-time spokesperson, an unusual arrangement that raised questions about who was funding this operation. The media strategy employed three key tactics: flooding news outlets with the abduction narrative, attacking any alternative theories as cruel conspiracy theories, and leveraging high-level political connections to pressure Portuguese authorities. British newspapers quickly divided into two camps. Those supporting the official abduction story received exclusive interviews and access, while those questioning inconsistencies faced legal threats and advertising boycotts. Several British journalists later admitted they had been warned by editors to avoid questioning the official narrative or risk career-ending lawsuits. The political interference was even more troubling. Within days of the disappearance, the British Prime Minister's office had become directly involved, with diplomatic pressure applied to Portuguese authorities. Police files later revealed that UK government officials had contacted Portuguese police more than 30 times in the first week, an unprecedented level of involvement in what was technically a routine missing person case. This political pressure intensified when Portuguese investigators began pursuing the refrigerator theory. In September 2007, Gonçalo Amaral was suddenly removed from the case after complaining about British interference in a newspaper interview. His replacement immediately shifted the investigation away from forensic evidence and back toward the abduction theory, despite the lack of supporting evidence. But perhaps the most disturbing aspect of the media manipulation involved the systematic removal of digital evidence. A blog maintained by one of the dinner companions in the weeks before and after the disappearance was suddenly deleted in its entirety in late May 2007. Internet archiving services showed the blog had been active for years but was professionally scrubbed from servers, not merely deleted but removed using specialized tools that overwrote the data to prevent recovery. When Portuguese police requested access to email communications between the 9 dinner companions, they discovered that multiple accounts had been emptied and reset. Cell phone records showed dozens of text messages exchanged on the night of May 3rd, yet the content of these messages was unavailable. All parties claimed to have either lost their phones or reset them to factory settings in the weeks following. Even more suspicious was the treatment of online discussion forums. Users who questioned the official narrative or mentioned the refrigerator theory found their accounts suspended, their comments deleted, and in some cases received cease and desist letters from lawyers representing the family. This level of monitoring and legal response to online discussion was unprecedented and suggested resources far beyond what a typical family could access. Have you ever wondered why certain theories about high-profile cases get completely erased from public discussion? Not just disagreed with, but actively removed from the internet. The manipulation extended to search engine results as well. Analysis by tech journalists showed evidence of coordinated SEO campaigns to push certain narratives to the top of search results while burying others. Keywords related to refrigerator, Cadaver dogs, or forensic evidence combined with the case name, would return warning pages about defamatory content, rather than actual search results, a level of search engine manipulation that typically costs hundreds of thousands of dollars to implement. Portuguese journalists faced even more direct pressure. Several reporters who covered the forensic findings or the refrigerator theory were summarily fired after their media outlets received legal threats. One Portuguese newspaper editor later revealed that his publication had received over 30 legal letters in a single month, an unprecedented campaign of legal intimidation. By early 2008, the narrative had been effectively controlled. The refrigerator theory, despite its evidentiary support, had been successfully relegated to conspiracy theory status in mainstream coverage. Amaral's book, which detailed the forensic evidence supporting the theory, was temporarily banned through legal action, and he faced personal financial ruin defending multiple lawsuits. What's the weather like where you are? Here, there's a chill in the air that reminds me of this case. Drop a comment below about your local weather. It helps our community connect while YouTube's algorithm notices the engagement. The media manipulation campaign had succeeded in its primary goal, shifting public attention away from the forensic evidence and the refrigerator theory. But one man refused to be silenced, despite the enormous personal cost he would pay for speaking out. Gonçalo Amaral wasn't a typical police investigator. With over 27 years of experience in Portugal's Polícia Judiciária, he had specialized in complex homicide investigations and had solved numerous high-profile cases. His methodical, evidence-based approach had earned him respect among his colleagues and a reputation for thoroughness. When assigned to lead the investigation in Praia da Luz, he approached it like any other case, following evidence rather than narratives. Amaral's investigation methodology differed significantly from the media-friendly approach demanded by British authorities. He prioritized forensic evidence, timeline verification, and witness credibility assessment over public appeals and press conferences. This methodical approach quickly led his team to identify critical inconsistencies in the initial statements provided by the 9 dinner companions. His first major breakthrough came when analyzing the timeline of May 3rd. By cross-referencing all witness statements, restaurant receipts, cell phone data, and security camera footage from nearby locations, Amaral's team constructed a minute-by-minute timeline that revealed impossible contradictions in the dinner group's accounts. Multiple individuals claimed to be in different locations at the same time, and the window for an abductor to enter and exit undetected narrowed to virtually zero. The second key discovery involved the cadaver dog evidence. Amaral personally observed the dog's work and noted that Eddie, the cadaver dog, alerted only in specific locations associated with the family. Apartment 5A, the rental car and items of clothing, and nowhere else despite searching numerous other apartments and vehicles. The statistical improbability of false positives in this specific pattern convinced Amaral that human remains had been present in these locations. But it was the refrigerator evidence that Amaral found most compelling. His team meticulously documented its disappearance, interviewed maintenance staff and night security personnel, and tracked down the dump worker who reported finding a similar appliance weeks later. When combined with the forensic evidence of extensive cleaning in apartment 5A and the cadaver dog alerts, Amaral became convinced that the refrigerator had been used to conceal remains during the critical period before the rental car became available. In October 2007, Amaral was abruptly removed from the case after complaining about British interference in a newspaper interview. The official reason given was an unrelated case, but the timing, immediately after he had compiled his findings on the refrigerator theory, struck many Portuguese officials as suspicious. Prevented from completing his investigation and bound by professional confidentiality while still employed by the police, Amaral made a difficult decision. In July 2008, he took early retirement from the force and published The Truth of the Lie, a detailed account of his investigation and findings. The book became an instant bestseller in Portugal, selling over 120,000 copies in its first few months and later being translated into multiple languages. The book methodically laid out the evidence supporting what became known as the refrigerator theory. Amaral detailed the forensic findings, the cadaver dog evidence, the timeline inconsistencies, and the suspicious disappearance of the refrigerator. He stopped short of making definitive accusations, instead presenting the evidence and allowing readers to draw their own conclusions. The response was swift and devastating. Within weeks of publication, Amaral found himself facing a $1.2 million lawsuit, claiming defamation and damage to the ongoing search efforts. His assets were frozen, including royalties from the book, which was temporarily banned from sale. The legal action effectively silenced him financially, while the case wound through Portugal's court system. What followed was a legal battle spanning more than 7 years. Amaral, forced to rely on crowdfunding for his defense, faced not only the original lawsuit, but multiple additional legal actions, seemingly designed to drain his resources and break his resolve. At one point, he was reduced to living with friends, his personal finances completely depleted by legal costs. Throughout this ordeal, Amaral refused to recant his findings or alter his professional assessment of the evidence. In court testimony, he maintained that he had a professional and moral obligation to publish his conclusions when he felt the investigation had been improperly derailed. In April 2016, after years of legal battles, Portugal's highest court ruled in Amaral's favor, overturning the ban on his book and rejecting the defamation claims against him. The court's decision explicitly stated that Amaral's right to professional expression outweighed other considerations, and that his book represented his good faith professional assessment based on evidence he had personally examined. Despite this legal vindication, the personal cost to Amaral was enormous. His police career was ended, his marriage collapsed under the strain, and his reputation was systematically attacked in British media. Yet the core of his investigation findings, particularly regarding the refrigerator theory, remained intact and unrefuted by any forensic evidence. In rare interviews following his legal victory, Amaral remained focused on the evidence rather than personal vindication. He consistently pointed to the forensic findings, the cadaver dog alerts, and the missing refrigerator as the key elements that had convinced him of what really happened during those 24 critical days in Praia da Luz. "I did not set out to create controversy," he stated in a 2017 interview. "I simply followed the evidence where it led, as any proper police investigator must do. The fact that this evidence pointed toward an uncomfortable conclusion does not make it any less valid." Amaral's persistence ensured that despite extraordinary efforts to suppress it, the refrigerator theory and its supporting evidence remained part of the case's historical record, a testament to one investigator's refusal to abandon his professional integrity despite overwhelming pressure. The alleged cover-up didn't begin with high-level political intervention. It started in the first hours after the disappearance, with a series of small but significant actions that, when viewed collectively, suggest a coordinated effort to obscure evidence. The timeline of suspicious activities begins on the night of May 3rd. According to statements from Ocean Club staff, Apartment 5A was cleaned extensively before police arrived. One housekeeper later testified that she was surprised to find the apartment smelling strongly of bleach when she arrived to assist in the search, unusual for a vacation rental and particularly strange given the emergency circumstances. By dawn on May 4th, the family had already contacted British media and politicians before Portuguese detectives could conduct thorough interviews. Within 24 hours, a British public relations specialist had arrived in Praia da Luz, an extraordinarily rapid deployment that raised questions about how this connection had been established so quickly. May 5th brought the first documented instance of evidence tampering. Security camera footage from a nearby supermarket, which might have captured movements around the Ocean Club, was requested by police but found to have been erased, despite the store's policy of keeping footage for 30 days. The store manager could not explain this deviation from protocol. Between May 6th and May 10th, the refrigerator disappeared from apartment 5A. No maintenance records authorized its removal, and no staff member claimed responsibility. This 5-day window coincides with a period when the apartment was left largely unmonitored, as police focused on searching the surrounding area. May 12th marked another suspicious development when a British diplomatic vehicle was observed making multiple trips between Praia da Luz and the Spanish border. When Portuguese authorities requested information about these trips, they were told it was routine diplomatic business and denied further details under diplomatic immunity provisions. The most critical period, the 24-day window between the disappearance and the rental of the Renault Scenic on May 27th, contains numerous unexplained activities. Cell phone triangulation data shows that 2 of the dinner companions made repeated trips to remote areas outside Praia da Luz during this period, including 3 visits to an area near the Barragem do Arada reservoir, a location that would later become of interest to investigators. If you've stayed with me this far, you're clearly someone who cares about truth and justice. This is the moment I need to ask for your help. Hit that subscribe button right now and share this video with anyone who values honest investigation. The algorithms suppress this kind of content, and only your engagement can help break through that barrier. Do it now. I'll wait. The cover-up extended beyond physical evidence to digital trails as well. Between May 18th and June 10th, at least 3 laptops used by members of the dinner group were reported as damaged by water or stolen and replaced. The original devices were never recovered for forensic examination. During this same period, email accounts were purged, social media profiles were deleted, and phone records showed dozens of calls to UK media executives and government officials. Perhaps most damning was the handling of forensic evidence. The samples collected from behind the sofa in apartment 5A and from the trunk of the Renault Scenic were sent to a British laboratory rather than being processed in Portugal, an unusual protocol deviation that Portuguese authorities protested but were overruled on through diplomatic channels. When these samples were finally processed, the results came with qualifying statements about degradation and contamination that forensic experts later questioned. More troubling still, Portuguese requests for the raw testing data were denied, preventing independent verification of the results. The cover-up reached its peak in July 2007, when British officials directly intervened to prevent the Portuguese police from conducting a reconstruction of the night of May 3rd, with all 9 dinner companions present. This reconstruction, standard procedure in Portuguese investigations, was blocked through diplomatic pressure, with British authorities claiming it would be too stressful for those involved. By September 2007, when Amaral was removed from the case, key evidence had already disappeared. The refrigerator from apartment 5A, security camera footage from nearby businesses, original digital devices used by key witnesses, complete phone records from the night of May 3rd, the raw data from forensic testing. The pattern of evidence disappearance follows a clear timeline that aligns perfectly with the refrigerator theory, a 24-day window during which remains could have been temporarily concealed before being moved via the rental car to a final location. What makes this case so disturbing isn't just the evidence that disappeared, but the extraordinary resources deployed to ensure it disappeared permanently, resources far beyond what would typically be available in a missing person case. The coordinated nature of these disappearances, spanning physical evidence, digital records, and witness testimony, points to an organized effort involving multiple parties with significant influence. The refrigerator that vanished from apartment 5A wasn't just an appliance, it was the central piece in a puzzle that powerful interests have spent years ensuring would never be completed. The refrigerator theory stands on a foundation of forensic evidence that has never been adequately explained away. Cadaver dog alerts in specific locations, including where the refrigerator once stood, DNA evidence that was sent to a British lab rather than processed locally, and luminol reactions indicating extensive cleaning. These physical findings, combined with the documented disappearance of the refrigerator and the suspicious rental car activity 24 days later, create a timeline that challenges the official narrative at its core. The questions that remain unanswered are as troubling today as they were years ago. Why did cadaver dogs alert only to locations associated with the family and nowhere else? What happened to the refrigerator that disappeared from apartment 5A? Why was there a 24-day gap before renting a car that would later show evidence of human remains? Why were Portuguese investigators pressured to abandon forensic evidence in favor of an abduction theory with no supporting proof? And perhaps most importantly, why were such extraordinary resources deployed to control this narrative? Resources including government officials, media manipulation, and legal intimidation campaigns. If you've found value in this investigation, please subscribe to Criminal Instinct now. Your support allows us to continue bringing you the stories that others won't touch, the cases where power and influence have distorted the path to truth. Hit that notification bell so you never miss our uploads. The refrigerator theory may never be proven conclusively. Too much evidence has disappeared, too many witnesses have been silenced, and too much time has passed. But the pattern of evidence suppression in this case should disturb anyone who believes in justice and transparency. When a refrigerator disappears and governments intervene, when cadaver dogs alert and their findings are dismissed, when media narratives are controlled through legal threats, we must ask ourselves what truth lies beneath the carefully constructed story we've been told. Some cases aren't just about finding answers. They're about questioning why certain answers were never allowed to be found.